12 days after we signed off the budget. Does it seem that long? Okay, we've got some apologies from Councillor Cooper and Councillor Filipaina for absence, Mayor Goff for early departure, Councillor Fletcher for early departure. Any other apologies? Councillor Coombe?
Same meeting with the Mayor at 3 o'clock.
Right, well, you never know. Okay, potentially. Well, it's up to you, up to you, up to you. Have you got those others? Councillor, Deputy Mayor and Councillor Coombe. Right, thank you. We've also...
And me.
Early departure?
Yeah,
Thanks,
18.
Councillor Collins. We have electronic link. Councillor Bartley, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Good afternoon, thank you. I call for any declarations of interest. None being received, we'll go on to the confirmation of minutes, and we have 2 minutes for, sets of minutes for confirmation. The 18th of June, both open and confidential, and the 16th of July, open. I'll move those, seconded by Deputy Chair. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. There are no petitions, there's no public input, there's no local board input, and I know of no extraordinary items. So we now move to item 8, which is the Auckland Council Group Policy for Retention of Money, should we have any. No, seriously. Noting, of course, there are a lot of financial benefits and efficiencies from this, and I ask our Treasurer, John Bishop, to speak to this item. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. Look, just 3 key points on this paper. First of all, what are retentions? Look, retentions relate to sums of money that we hold back from payments under construction contracts until the defects liability period has expired. And treatment of these funds is governed by the Construction Contracts Act. Why do we want a group policy? It's to enable these funds to be held in one account. And at the moment, the dollars involved are around about sort of 40 to 50 million. This allows us to achieve efficiency through having one process and one bank account, rather than having separate bank accounts in each CCO, which are not part of an efficient bank account offset arrangement. Now, Council already undertakes this function on behalf of Auckland Transport, and we've been asked to undertake this function by Watercare. This policy has been endorsed by our internal Treasury Management Steering Group and each of the CCOs. Now, the reason why it's in front of you today is that group policies require approval from this committee.
Thank you. Any questions? Well, that's great then. Well done. Good presentation. There's hardly any questions. That's excellent. So those of you who've managed to have a quick read of our CCO review will notice that they've asked for more of these group policies. They save us some money, fewer bank accounts, less admin costs, better value for money. So good idea. I'd like to move then the recommendation to approve, seconded by the Deputy. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, now we move on to our emergency budget update, noting that, as I said at the beginning of the meeting, only 12 days since we've signed it off. So guys, what's been happening? How are we going? And what does the thermometer look like? And you'll get that every single month. So, Michael, do you want to...
Yeah. Kia ora, everyone.
Thank you.
So a key theme from our emergency budget for this year was the level of uncertainty implicit in our assumptions and the projections we made. And we were very clear through that process that regular updates would be required to enable the Council through this committee to respond to any new information. So this is the first of those updates. The recommendations included in this paper address firstly our overall approach to any improvement in funding and budget capacity over the first half of the year, and then secondly, the recent confirmation of Crown funding through the Shovel Ready program. So, context. As the Chair has mentioned, it's been less than 2 weeks since we adopted our emergency budget, and this budget was focused on our response to the twin challenges of COVID-19 related disruption and an unprecedented drought. Our response focused, as you can see there, on the use of 4 key levers: increased borrowing, capital expenditure timing changes, operating expenditure reductions, and more asset recycling. So a key part of setting any budget is identifying and documenting our core assumptions, the levels of uncertainty around those assumptions, and the potential impacts of that uncertainty. And you can find that documentation actually in the budget document. So in this budget, new factors were incorporated into the development of these assumptions, such as projected COVID alert levels, and the levels of uncertainty increased accordingly. So given this uncertainty, it is important that we look at how we will respond to the variances to these assumptions and the resulting projections as they become clear. So the key part of the emergency budget was that it projected our debt levels as high as 290% of revenue. So our financial strategy has set limits for prudent borrowing at 270%, but given the circumstances, we've agreed to go above this for 1 year. So we feel it's important that to demonstrate financial prudence and to maintain market and public confidence, we return to those levels set in the strategy as soon as possible. So what do we do if we find ourselves with improved levels of funding and budget capacity as the year progresses? Our recommendation is that for the first half of the year, the most prudent approach would be to reduce debt. And there's a number of reasons for that, and they're listed there on the slide. The first, to buffer against any other shocks we find ourselves with, and through the working of the budget and the adoption, people have mentioned that there could be others. We're not immune to further shocks. We think that paying down debt sends a strong signal to credit rating agencies, and then that's our approach, that we are a council that wants to return to a prudent situation. We think that that will help maintain our access to debt markets when we need them, and then also that reducing that debt will increase our capacity as we move into the long-term plan. So when we get to our half-yearly report, which will be adopted in February, we think it would be valuable to review this approach and assess our overall financial picture. By this stage, we'll be able to look at trends we're seeing in our overall operating performance, both revenue and spend. We'll be able to see how our capital spend is tracking against where it was projected to be in the budget. We'll be able to know whether we're on track against our asset recycling targets and whether we feel like we'll still be able to achieve those. And we'll also be able to see how our debt's looking. So this slide looks at key scenarios under which we may find ourselves with improved funding capacity. So the first one is shovel ready, and the paper today talks about the first tranche of those announcements and how we approach those that have been confirmed. Second ones is as other operating funding, other external funding becomes available. This includes collaboration with Kāinga Ora on some of our Auckland housing projects. Any improved revenue, so the forecasting assumptions we made in the annual budget were based on where we saw things going. Key assumptions included economic recovery, the pace of economic recovery, development projections, which would influence regulatory revenues, and also where we saw public transport revenues leading to throughout the year. And then the fourth is our working capital position. As we see how much take-up we have, particularly of the rates postponement options that we offer. So next I'll hand over to Pramod to give us an update of where we're at this stage.
Thanks, Mike. Kia ora. So I'm just going to touch on the group revenue picture and how that looked at the end of July. So in the slide on the left, basically what that's showing is the emergency budget projected operating cash income across the council group to be around 450 million less than previously budgeted, and that pie chart provides a breakdown of the relevant areas that were impacted. So the results at the end of July are actually quite positive. However, I need to caution that the results are only for the first month of the financial year, and things still remain highly uncertain. And that's no indication of the trends going forward at this stage. In terms of some of the drivers for the July results include better than expected regulatory revenue through better consenting volumes, and we've also seen the same for IGC revenue for water care. Ports revenue is also slightly better than expected with favourable volumes through the port in July. For RFA, the zoo had quite a good month, which led to RFA revenue also being slightly better, and AT and community facilities revenue on track for July. So generally, overall quite good news, but again, just cautioning that it is only for the first month of the year, and we'll continue to keep monitoring this on a monthly basis and provide updates to the committee on the revenue picture, CapEx, debt and asset recycling, as Mike mentioned. So the report also provides an update on shovel-ready projects. So just to provide a bit of background, in April this year, the council submitted a list of projects for consideration of government shovel-ready funding. To date, approximately 350 million of central government funding has been confirmed through recent government announcements. The funding agreements for the TIFO pathway and the resource recovery network were signed by the council's acting Chief Executive on 6 August 2020, so last week. This funding is subject to a number of terms and conditions, primarily around meeting agreed milestones, Auckland Council covering any cost overruns and achieving the benefits that were represented when the projects were submitted for consideration. The council has worked with Crown infrastructure partners who will provide the funding to set realistic milestones, which will maximise the amount of funding that can be recovered in each financial year, and therefore to minimise any impact on the council's debt. At this stage, work is still progressing with central government and Kāinga Ora on the details of the funding agreements for the 188 million of infrastructure to support the Auckland housing program. I need to mention though that any funding is unlikely to create debt capacity, and any further updates on this will be provided to the committee as more information is available. The table on the slide provides a breakdown of the level of funding for confirmed projects to date. I mentioned earlier that approximately 350 million has been confirmed to date, and the table provides the relevant projects and the amount of funding confirmed. When the emergency budget was confirmed, not all of the details were available at the time, so certain assumptions were made in relation to projects that had been announced to receive funding at adoption time. So the emergency budget assumed 30 million of funding for stage 1 of the ferry basin redevelopment and the Puhunui bus rail interchange projects. Since the adoption of the emergency budget, cash flow projections may turn out to be slightly better than the 30 million of funding that was assumed in the emergency budget, but further work is being undertaken with finance staff and Auckland Transport. And once better information is available on those projects, we will come back and report that to this committee as well. At the time of adoption, the Northwestern Bus Improvement and TIFO projects were also announced as in line to receive funding, but those projects were not included in the draft emergency budget. So the emergency budget assumed additional capital investment of 10 million for the Northwestern Bus Improvement and 5 million for the TIFO pathway, as well as 15 million of corresponding funding that would be received for those projects. As both of those projects I mentioned weren't funded in the draft budgets, that didn't create any additional capacity for council. The emergency budget, so I'm just going to move on to, the resource recovery network. The emergency budget did include provision for council's portion of funding that was in the emergency budget. At that stage, 3.4 million contribution was budgeted for. Currently, there is no budget for the shovel-ready portion of funding that has been confirmed. And so the report is also outlining that an additional 5.2 million of additional capex and the corresponding funding needs to be approved to ensure that the project can proceed as agreed with CIP. And again, as mentioned, as more information comes to light in relation to any of these projects and any further announcements, we will come back and update the committee on those.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Councillors. So just an update on the operating expenditure savings lever. The group picture is up there for you to see how the savings across the group are spread. So we have a savings now locked into the budget of around 214 million. I'm going to talk today about the Auckland Council parent 120 million in a little bit more detail. So this shows the thermometer, as the chair called it. So we pleasingly have achieved to date 55 million of the 120 million of savings. A lot of that was locked in through the budget adoption that happened just a couple of weeks ago. A couple of things to note. The 15 million of interest savings for FY21, John Bishop's team have been busily working away, locking that in through hedging contracts, and that is all in place to reduce the interest costs in FY21. We have scoured through the professional services budgets and identified all of the departments now where that 4 million will be trimmed. That's about 10% savings of our total budget. We received confirmation from the Valuer General that we could defer the triennial property revaluation process, which I've mentioned previously. Just to update you, that's been confirmed. The part of the savings we had identified were coming through a reduction in the size of the vehicle fleet, and so far, just in July, 26 vehicles have been sold. There's another 60 that have been identified and are in the process of disposal, some sitting at with auction companies. So that is looking very positive, and part of the budget decision making was the reduction in grants that we had discussed. There are some staff-related savings that have been achieved that we've also mentioned before, just to remind you, around the voluntary salary reduction scheme that was in place for staff earning over 100,000. There have been also some reductions in vacant budgeted positions, so this is not making people redundant, but as we'd had a recruitment freeze on for some months, we were able to review some of those positions and determine that they were no longer required. And we have reduced the staff training budgets as well. That's all been locked in. So the rest, obviously those numbers don't add up to 55 million. There are a range of other smaller things that are in there related to the lists that have been previously disclosed to you. In terms of what's in delivery, there are some items that needed consultation with local boards, and that process is continuing at the moment, and there are some change processes underway as well. The identified savings, that blue part, the largest component of that is the procurement savings, where procurement have been working on identifying pipeline of contracts and opportunities. So that is good progress on that. And the unidentified savings, that is the area where the operating model work that Patricia has talked about is underway. In terms of risks with the savings, obviously the most challenging one is to get the savings implemented as soon as we can. It gets harder and harder as we go through the year. So that is the why we are reporting frequently to the executive team on that. And in terms of opportunities, we've also been working in the corporate property space, and there are potentially a few more savings ideas that are being investigated in that space as well. So should have some updates on that next month. So that's it, and pass back to Mike.
Thank you. So just, clearly the next steps. So as the Chair has mentioned, we'll be coming back monthly to give updates on where things are at. We'll return to our more in-depth quarterly reporting process with more detailed analysis. And then, as I said earlier, at the half year, once the half year is closed and you have your half-yearly report, we'll have a full reassessment of our financial position and outlook and look to reassess that approach. And I think it's just questions.
Right. Thank you, Michael, Pramod and Nicola. Questions? Councillor Casey.
Yeah, just in light of the panel's recommendation this morning with regard to procurement, it's one that's come up at the Strategic Procurement Committee for as long as I've been either on it or listening into it. The figure you've got for savings is the Auckland Council parent procurement savings, or is it right across the CCOs? And if it is just the parent, if we implemented the recommendation of the panel with regard to mandatory involvement in procurement across all the CCOs, would you be reviewing your target for savings in procurement? The answer should be yes, by the way.
Yeah. Yes, it absolutely should be yes.
Through the Chair, thanks for the guidance. Look, the Value for Money Committee did actually have a report on procurement, and it talked about the group procurement. There were improvements made. There are certain contracts now are actually let on a complete group basis. Insurance is a good example. But no, there is still room to move. I couldn't tell you a number today as to how much that might eventuate to be. But there has, but again, there has been improvements made. Healthy Waters and Watercare are working much closer together on their procurement now around some of their infrastructure works. Insurance, vehicles, that was actually pulled together. So transport vehicles came across two councils, now one fleet. So it's all been procured on one basis there. So, definite improvements have been made, but there can be more. And so that will be...
That was my point. How much more can we grab from procurement if we implement?
BFM identified a figure last term. I just can't remember it off the top of my head, but it did have a figure.
It was an
Quite high
opportunity.
too, yeah.
It was an opportunity amount, and it wasn't hundreds of millions. We know we've got some for parents, 10 million or so. We do know some of the CCOs will be incorporating that in the individuals, but bringing it together, what you've touched on is where the real value comes. So no, we have to come back on that. Thanks.
Okay, any other questions? Member Blair.
Yeah, just on page 3, if you could just explain that diagram. Is that in comparison of FY20 would be helpful in terms of the revenue streams? So if you take ports, for example, and you're saying that revenues are up, what are they up by?
Through the Chair. So the comparison that that I've provided in the July update is in relation to what the projections were for July as agreed in the emergency budget. It's quite difficult to compare to the previous financial year as the situation was quite different then. So it is compared to what was expected in July. So it's a comparison to what the budget.
So you're expecting to lose more in the comparison?
Correct.
But okay, so
at this stage,
we positive.
It is a positive result, but we're not talking about tens of millions of dollars here. It is still just 1 month's results, and so favourable against the first month of the emergency budget.
I just needed to kind of get that picture so that we know what we're comparing with. Cheers. Thank you.
Yeah, remember, we don't normally get monthly reporting, so this is, we're just slowly catchy monkey. It's good, but we've got to look at it when it comes to the quarter to have some real comparisons. Councillor Watson.
So just a question on the fleet vehicles, the 26 fleet vehicles sold. So there's 100k operational, so I take it that's for petrol and warrants and all the rest of it. So how much did you get for this actual sale of the vehicles? And in addition to that, 26 is quite a number. How are we able to rid ourselves of 26 vehicles and allow people to do their business?
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have all the answers to your questions. I can find out how much the proceeds were of the vehicles that were sold to date. Your second question?
Just a question. 26 is quite a number. I'm just wondering how we're able to make that saving operation in terms of people going about their various businesses and accounts.
I know there's been work underway to understand the usage of vehicles and improve the utilisation levels of them, and more use of Skype meetings and things like that, reducing travel around the region. So I can get more information on that if that's helpful.
Just wonder in relation to the council family as a whole, although I'm a little wary of using the word family after this morning.
Distant relatives.
The clan maybe. There was a suggestion at one point of time where it was, for instance, it's going to be a policy for, or a suggestion that people use public transport, for instance. So, is there any work underway for that? And I think particularly of, maybe not so much council, Auckland Council, but say like AT, where I know last time I was out there, I saw them all catching taxis out at a place which had a very regular train service. Is there anything in the pipeline there in terms of perhaps Auckland Transport, you know what I'm talking about?
Look, through the chair, there's quite a large traffic demand management plan Auckland Transport's rolled through. They actually had a promotion through council here as well. They were issuing AT hot cards. We have staff here that use AT hot cards issued by the organisation if it's for work business. Transport do use it quite a lot. The other piece of the puzzle, Nicola did mention things like Skype meetings, but we've also implemented some of the our mobile technology as well. So, for instance, you remember there was a major program, Inspect, where we actually issued mobile devices to our building inspectors. So they were doing on average now 10 inspections per day rather than 8. So we've actually enabled them to do that, use cars less often because they can actually base it from home and other locations now. So look, a variety of things. But AT hot cards are used more now than they used to be, and taxis are used less. We do monitor taxi use.
That was part of the VFM work, wasn't it, that building consent thing? Councillor Hills, did you have anything to add to that?
Oh, no, it was just that the significant body of work has been done for the climate reasons, but also money-saving reasons, but also the way the keys are given out now. There's like a timer on them. If people don't pick them up in time, they can't have the keys for an 8-hour day when they're only using the car for 1 hour. There's been a lot of research done that many of the cars sit dormant for like 80% of the week. So it's making sure it's not being taken from people like rangers and others that really need the vehicles all the time, and other things like Skype or public transport, but also for the fact that many of the vehicles just are not used, but we're paying for registration, we're paying for all the things. So far I don't think there has been a negative effect on any kind of productivity. In fact, I think it may have increased it.
Thanks for that. Councillor Darby.
Thanks, team. Appreciate this. Just going forward, I'm really interested in how we get the alert when, say, a capital project is running over budget. So I'll give the example of the Dolphin. It was 9.6 and it ran away to 33, and we didn't know about it. So how do we get a red flag? Probably, Kevin, question to you. How do we ensure that we as governors get the red flag that something's running away? Now, there's another one of recent which I'm aware of as a liaison councillor to the AET board, but I'm bound by confidence. I've let the mayor and the deputy mayor know. But we've only found out about that, and it still hasn't come to us. So you can be quickly behind $10, $20 million, and there's still people spending on that, going for consents, even though it's blowing out. So how do we get on top of that, Kevin, so that we know early, so that we're in a position where we can make a call and say, hey, this is not where we thought we'd be going with this. You're beyond your mandate, CCO, or you're beyond your mandate, core council.
Yep, through the chair. A few pieces to this. First up, all projects are monitored, obviously by project managers and through to their executive team. So there is a report going through on a quarterly basis around the programs, and so that actually flags any concerns at an executive level about project overruns on the cost side. Another piece of the puzzle, though, does have to be on the basis that we are running programs of work, and so some of those where an individual project may be up or down will be reflected by savings somewhere else. So some of it is run on a program basis. The bit I don't think we have done too well is actually escalating them to you if it actually is of concern. Now, some of them can be managed within contingencies and other factors, but if it does reach the scale you're talking about, we do need to make sure that's escalated from just the factors it's public interest if those projects are running over. So we probably haven't been as good as we could have been in the past about escalating them to the governing body or through this actual committee, but I can assure you that the executive team does see program updates on the performance, financial risk assessment, those sort of aspects.
Okay, look, Chair, I might leave it with you and Kevin to have a look at this, because I think we do need better oversight. So if you take the Dolphin one, for example, I had that response as well from staff that it was in a program budget. But when you've got a component of that program budget that is ballooning out like this, well beyond any information or advice that we received, it's affecting the balance of the program. Something's got to give. One is something should not escalate by 300% for a start. That should have been escalated to us. And I'm interested in going forward, listening to the CCO review and starting to read it today. I think we're going to have to be a lot more on top of this. I'm interested in a process being set in place to ensure that we are on top of it.
So I think you're absolutely right, because I've got to have confidence that the lessons have been learned, and I'm not sure that they have. You know, I mean, those big pockets are great, but it's far too big. So anything over 5 million, we will keep an eye. That was sort of the threshold that we will keep a bit of a running brief on. And I think, you know, this particular year, we will monitor our projects and our finances more than we have ever done before. And as a result, there'll be some great learnings in that, I think. You know, in a perfect world, and it's not perfect, but I would like to sort of make sure that we get to the end of this year and we don't have any cost overruns, because we have done things differently. This is not BAU, and we will look at doing that. So you've made a very good point. Thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you have something?
Just further to this one, it's through strategic procurement, all projects that are underway that are valued over at 5 million get referred to strategic procurement on a quarterly basis of where they are to budget, and any overruns are obviously red flagged and questioned. And then there's bundles of projects under the 5 million bracket which also check through, so if any overruns they show up. So that's one process where they are actually illuminated if they go through. That's only for projects that have started, whereas the Dolphins were still in the planning stage.
That's a good point too. Thank you. Councillor Sayers.
Madam Chair, I just want to pick up perhaps on what Councillor Watson was talking about with the vehicles. So I think I heard we've got 26, we're going to 60 that we're selling, and through auction mainly. So I was just curious around probably each of those cars have a book value. So do we just sell them through the auctioneer and get the best price we can, or is there any sort of guidance in trying to recover the book value? Just curious about how that might be working.
Through the chair, obviously we'll try to get the best value that we can when we sell a vehicle. Typically vehicles are depreciated over a low number of years, so it would be very unusual that we would make sales for less than the book value.
I think that's what you were alluding to, Councillor Watson, just in terms of the capital we're getting back, and I just thought a comparison against book value might be helpful.
Yeah, I can find out the
overall, perhaps at the end of the exercise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well done. Thank you. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Newman.
Thank you. Apologies. Good presentation, but I guess it kind of flows on maybe from what Councillor Darby was talking about. Just looking at a look here at the July update, we've got some better than forecast revenue positions across a number of areas. I guess for me, how many months or how many quarters of positive variations do we look at before we make an adjustment? And what's the formula for making that adjustment? Is it, for example, if our regulatory position is better than what we forecast, and that we're baking in a adjustment to budget in that space, or if there's an uptick in revenue from AT, is there I mean, how does that all work, and what's our oversight and what's our role in the decision making as we bake in positive variations against the budget?
So I think the key point that we've said here is that for the first 6 months, our recommendation is that we treat that to debt, and then we do a full reassessment with the 6 monthly report. And at that stage, that further recommendations will come to you for the council to make decisions about any other changes they might like to make over and above paying down debt. So if how to deal with additional revenue and to provide you with other options.
Yeah, I just, I mean, I can understand paying down debt as the first position, but I'm not sure I want to be sitting waiting for you to recommend to me what you think I should do next. I mean, I kind of want to have an input as to you understanding what my next priority will be after debt is reduced and we get a bit more of a ceiling. I mean, I think this needs to be recast, whereby we set the direction here rather than wait for you to give me your best professional advice. You can comment on my recommendation, but I want to have the input first.
Yeah, we've talked about that. Kevin, do you want to?
Yeah, what you've got is professional advice. The risk and uncertainty, 290 we've talked about, on the basis we get back to 270 by June 22 is critical for our credit agencies, the impact on the markets, the ability to actually pick up debt. So the professional opinion is that for 6 months, because of the uncertainty, we believe it should be debt priority. But in answer to your question though, every month we'll be coming back and giving you those trends analysis, showing how things are stacking up against the expectations, our assumptions, they still stand, financially how we're going. So every month, if you believe we need to move differently than that professional advice, that's when you can actually give us some direction decisions at those stages. So our recommendation is first 6 months, too much uncertainty, but every month you'll be seeing the numbers.
Yeah, I guess, Chair, the point being that I accept the position in relation to debt, but I think that we need to collectively be thinking beyond the debt as to what the priority queue would be. For me, it would probably be an adjustment to our operating activities and some of the standards that we're driving in that space.
Yes, if you remember that this actually came up during the emergency budget as an issue with the local boards as well, and we did say we would workshop it, all right? So I suppose it's only month one. The staff are requesting that we use debt first, but I would think before the end of the year we will look and as we look at the progress, we will have a session where we'll actually start to debate what is the next step, especially because the 6 months will take us through to Christmas and we'll need to have it done well and truly before, so that staff can start working over the holidays. Okay? Councillor Dalton.
You've just answered my question. It was around the principles of increased revenue. What happens next? Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Walker.
May have already been answered, but quite obviously we've had the CCO review. There are a number of changes taking place. Some of them can happen quickly, and I'm assuming there will be some savings and some budgetary implications around that. Where are we going to be at in terms of giving us some feedback? Obviously, on Council's part, driving some of that change as quickly as possible, where there is a good case.
Yeah, look, yeah, through the chair, if I can answer that, Councillor Walker. So there's going to be 2 workshops to actually understand, look at what your recommendations are. Staff are recommending how to implement those. As you say, some are relatively quick. If there are flow implications of savings, we'd expect to pick those up as part of those monthly update conversations as well. The magnitude obviously is going to make a big difference here. If remembering, we were talking about, 450 million lost revenues, the 239 million of extra capital expenditure plus operational for the drought. So the scale was big. So to make a dent into that, we're going to have to see some massive changes coming through. But that's what we can actually get an update every month now, to see how much that big gap that we had to fill through these other levers is actually being filled in another way. And if we've got some large improvements coming through, including the CCO review, as we look to implement some of the recommendations coming out of there, we'll build that into those conversations.
The other question I've got, and I've raised it before, but I'll raise it again. and that is the $50 million provision that Watercare have got for dealing with the drought, is nowhere near enough in the respect that we have an opportunity to actually reduce water consumption across Auckland, make significant savings in carbon emissions, and if we are serious about that, and we as a council want to drive that, then there may be some short-term pain for some significant medium to long-term gain. And I still haven't really had any adequacy and any answers from that, either from council or Watercare. And I just asked the question as to whether or not we are actually serious about reducing carbon emissions.
Councillor Hills, do you want to talk to that? Is it coming up in your committee? CCO, sorry. Bill, your committee. I suppose, look, we'll have the quarterly reviews, will have the CCO material and the parent material. At the moment, we're month one, well, not even month one, we're 12 days in, and we've just started with the parent. But yes, that will be addressed, Councillor. I'll give you my assurance in the quarterly.
I've also asked for every CCO, there will be a CCO every meeting of the Environment and Climate Change Committee 1 that will report specifically on their climate plan, sustainability, their climate emissions reduction. Some have offered, I've met with all of them, they all have actually quite good plans underway or they're really ramping that up now. So I think Adrian's offered Panuku to be up first, but there hasn't been finalised or anything yet, but yeah. So that's only in informal way, so I'm hoping for one to come at each meeting.
For you, Madam Chair, just in reply, part of the problem is that we lack a water strategy. Having said that, irrespective of we as a council have a water strategy or not, we actually have to move on an implementation program in advance of that and effectively do the strategy through the back door. We don't even have that. So we're really, to quote somebody else that was quoted this morning, we're like a bird with half a wing in terms of how we're dealing with this issue that can conceivably escalate. But my ongoing issue is we have an opportunity, we're not addressing it. And when I say we, Auckland Council.
Yeah, so that will cover that in the next 2 workshops.
Yeah, and the water strategy has been escalated to under Patricia Reid, so there is work underway. It's not, it's being implemented like we asked for in November and February and March and all the way through the drought. So it's now at the top of the organisation as Auckland's water strategy, not Auckland Council, sorry, not necessarily Watercare, and they are happy to be involved with us.
Thank you for that. Look, just in conclusion then, I will say, oh sorry, no, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, could we just look back at the figures that you had up there before? Is it the one back, I think? Another? I think I found, I typed at 3.7 million reduced in staff training budgets, 50% reduction. Can you just tell me a little bit more about that?
Through the chair, so we identified generally the staff training budget is an area that's not fully spent each year, and we identified that as an area where we could reduce the budget and reduce levels of training on a temporary basis just for 12 months. And so all the training budgets right across the council parent have been reduced by half.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so with no further questions or comments, I just want to say, look, you know, our savings targets, remember value for money isn't a separate committee. This is, we're all doing value for money and our budget updates. It's a bit like a weight loss program, you know, you lose a lot in the first little while and then it becomes harder and harder and harder. Well, I don't know too much about weight loss, but I will, that's so they tell me. And so I think we should congratulate the staff. 55 million in 12 days isn't bad, is it? It's pretty good. Considering we're up for 120, it'll be the last bit that will be the hardest. So always welcome ideas, but I think we've made a pretty good start. Not me, member. I'm happy to lose weight in the money. Okay, that's it. Right. I've lost my train of thought. Moving to the recommendations then, I would like to move all 4 recommendations. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Deputy Chair. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Abstention? Carried. Thank you.